Hey guys, before I get into this video, just thought I'd give you a heads up that there will be a part 3 to this video series, I suppose. That should come out relatively soon and will be the final part. Also, I highly suggest, if you're watching this and haven't watched the part 1, that you do so, as I feel it might be a little hard to understand without it. I will link the part 1 in the description and we'll put a card up, but with all that being said, let's get into the video. After the boxing match, things remained rather calm for Ned over the next few years, at least by his standards. In early 1877, he joined his stepfather in an organised horse-stealing operation, along with a few other men, most notably Joe Byrne, who will become a major player in the events to come. On the 18th of September 1877, Kelly was arrested in Benalla for riding over a footpath while drunk. The following day, he was involved in a brawl with 4 police officers who were escorting him to court. For this, Kelly was fined and released without further incident. In August 1877, Kelly, with his stepfather, George King, and their other accomplices, stole 11 horses from a paddock owned by James Whitty. Kelly then altered the brands of said horses and sold 6 of them to William Baumgarten, a horse dealer in Barnawartha, near the New South Wales border. On the 26th of September, the horses were listed as stolen and the police began an investigation. On the 10th of November, William Baumgarten and his brother Gustav were arrested for selling stolen horses and the police were hot on Kelly's trail. A warrant for his arrest in relation to the Whitty larceny was sworn in March 1878 and a further warrant for the arrest of his younger brother Dan was issued on the 5th of April. On the 11th of April 1878, Constable Strachan, who was the officer in charge of Greta Police Station, heard that Kelly was at a shearing shed in New South Wales and was given leave to apprehend him. As a result of this, Kelly's old friend, Constable Fitzpatrick, who Kelly would claim held a grudge against him, due to Kelly knocking him down whilst he was trying to apprehend him, was ordered to Greta for relief duty. Before leaving for Greta, Fitzpatrick read in the Police Gazette of a warrant for Dan Kelly in relation to horse theft. Fitzpatrick then discussed with his sergeant at Benalla the idea of calling at the Kelly home on the way to Greta to arrest Dan. The sergeant agreed, but warned him to be careful, as the Kellys had acquired quite the reputation by this point. On the 15th of April, Fitzpatrick rode through Winton en route to Greta and stopped at the hotel there, where he had 1 brandy and lemonade, before making his way to the Kelly home. Finding Dan not present, Fitzpatrick remained with Kelly's mother in conversation for about an hour. 3 of the Kelly children were also present for this conversation. According to Fitzpatrick, at some point he heard someone chopping wood and went out to ensure that the chopping was licensed. Upon exiting the house, he found Brickley Williamson, a neighbour, who said that he didn't need a license because he was chopping wood on his own selection. Fitzpatrick then saw 2 horsemen making towards the Kelly house. The men proved to be the teenage Dan Kelly and his brother-in-law Bill Skillion. After seeing them, Fitzpatrick returned to the house and made the arrest. Dan asked to be allowed to have dinner before leaving, to which the constable consented. Minutes after this, Ned Kelly rushed in through the front door and fired a shot at Fitzpatrick with a revolver, but fortunately for the constable, missed him. Kelly's mother then hit Fitzpatrick over the head with a fire shovel, which was followed by a struggle in which Kelly fired 2 more shots, wounding Fitzpatrick just above his left wrist. During this intense struggle, Dan's friend Skillion and their neighbour Williamson entered the room, both armed with revolvers, and Dan subsequently managed to disarm Fitzpatrick. Ned apparently then told Fitzpatrick that he wouldn't have fired at him if he had known it was him. Fitzpatrick then fainted, and when he regained consciousness, Kelly compelled him to extract the bullet from his own arm with a knife, before Kelly's mother dressed the wound. Kelly then concocted a cover story, and said that if Fitzpatrick told his story, he would reward him after the Baumgarten case was over. Kelly's mother also somewhat threatened the constable by saying if he mentioned what really happened, that his life would be no good to him. Following this threat, Fitzpatrick was allowed to leave. He had ridden away about a mile when he found that 2 horsemen were pursuing him, but by spurring his horse into a gallop, he escaped to the Winton Hotel and was assisted inside by the manager, where his wound was rebandaged and he was given a brandy and water. The manager then rode with him to Benalla, where he reported the affair to his superior officer. Now that is only the story according to Fitzpatrick. According to the Kellys, Ned was 200 miles from home at the time of the incident, and that when Fitzpatrick had entered the home, his mother had asked the constable if he had a warrant, but Fitzpatrick replied that he only had a telegram, to which his mother said that Dan need not go. According to Ned Kelly, Fitzpatrick then said, whilst pulling out a revolver, "I will blow your brains out if you interfere." His mother replied to this, "You would not be so handy with that pop gun of yours if Ned was here." Dan supposedly then said, trying to trick Fitzpatrick, "There is Ned coming along by the side of the house," while he was pretending to look out the window for Ned, before cornering Fitzpatrick, taking his revolver, and allowing him to leave unharmed. If Fitzpatrick had suffered any wounds, according to Kelly, they were possibly self-inflicted, and also Skillion and Williamson were not present. In 1879, Ned's sister, Kate, who was aged 14 at the time of the incident, stated that Kelly shot Fitzpatrick after the constable had made sexual advances towards her. Ned Kelly would later deny Fitzpatrick had tried to take liberties with Kate, however, stating that, "No, that is a foolish story. If he or any other policeman tried to take liberties with my sister, Victoria would not hold him." Regardless of what actually happened, Williamson, Skillion, and Ellen Kelly were arrested soon after and charged with aiding and abetting attempted murder, but Ned and Dan Kelly were nowhere to be found. Come the end of the trial, Ellen Kelly, Skillion, and Williamson were unsurprisingly convicted as accessories to the attempted murder of Fitzpatrick. Skillion and Williamson both received sentences of 6 years, and Ellen 3 years of hard labour, which was considered a harsh sentence even by people who held no sympathies towards the Kellys. After the Fitzpatrick incident, Ned Kelly, Dan Kelly, and Joe Byrne went into hiding and were soon joined by Steve Hart, a friend of Dan. Not long after, the police received information that the Kelly gang were in the Wombat Ranges at the head of the King River. So, on the 25th of October, 1878, 2 mounted police parties consisting of 4 men in total were dispatched to search for them. After an unsuccessful first day of searching, on the following morning, one of the parties went out scouting, while the other, made up of McIntyre and Lonigan, remained at the camp. At about 5 p.m, the 4 members of the Kelly gang emerged from the bush and ordered the 2 policemen in the camp to bail up and raise their arms. According to McIntyre, each member of the group was armed with a rifle, but according to Ned, they only had 2 guns. McIntyre was unarmed at the time and subsequently raised his arms. According to McIntyre, Lonigan then made a motion to draw his revolver and ran for the cover of a tree a few yards away, with Ned immediately shooting and killing him. According to Ned, Lonigan had ducked behind a fallen tree and Ned shot him as he raised his head to fire. Following this, the Kelly gang questioned McIntyre and armed themselves with the policeman's shotgun and revolvers. Half an hour later, at about 5:30 p.m, the second party, made up of Kennedy and Scanlon, returned on horseback and the Kelly gang hid themselves in the nearby brush. According to McIntyre, he walked towards Kennedy, but before he could speak to him, the Kelly gang ordered the police to bail up. Kennedy tried to unclip his gun and holster and shots were fired by the gang. McIntyre advised Kennedy to surrender as he was surrounded. Meanwhile, Scanlon dismounted and was shot while trying to unsling his rifle. McIntyre later recalled that Scanlon didn't have time to fire a shot, but according to Ned, Scanlon fired and Ned shot him as he tried to fire again. Regardless, Scanlon died soon after. While this was happening, Kennedy had dismounted and according to McIntyre tried to surrender without firing a shot, but the gang continued firing at him. According to Kelly, Kennedy hid behind a tree and started firing before retreating into the bush where Ned and Dan pursued him for almost a mile, exchanging gunfire with a sergeant before Ned shot him in the right side. According to Ned, Kennedy then turned around to face him and Ned shot him in the chest with his shotgun, not realizing that Kennedy had dropped his revolver and was turning to surrender. In the exchange of all this gunfire, McIntyre, who was still unarmed, mounted Kennedy's horse and was able to escape. He reached Mansfield Police Station the following day and a search party quickly found the bodies of the fallen policemen. News of these killings led to widespread fear of the bushrangers. and on the 28th of October, the government of Victoria announced a reward of £800 for their arrest, which was soon increased to £2,000. On the 15th of November, the 4 members of the Kelly gang, having refused to surrender themselves, were declared outlaws. Now outlaws, on the run and in need of money, the Kelly gang planned to rob the bank in the small town of Euroa, which they did on the 9th of December. They emptied the safes and the cashier's drawers of cash and gold worth over £2,000. The 14 members of the bank's manager's household and staff were taken back to the Faithfuls Creek homestead as hostages. There the gang performed some trick riding for the hostages, who now numbered 37 people, before leaving at around 8:30 p.m. Following the Euroa raid, the police presence in northeastern Victoria was expanded, and the reward for Kelly's capture was increased to £1,000. Despite the fact they had just robbed a bank, the Kelly gang were soon in need of funds once more, as they had distributed most of the proceeds from Euroa to family, friends and associates who had given them assistance. So, in order to remedy this problem, they unsurprisingly decided they would rob another bank, this time in the town of Geraldry. After learning more about the town and the police presence there via chatting with patrons and staff at a nearby inn, just after midnight on the morning of Sunday the 9th of February, the gang went to the town's police barracks under the pretext of alerting the police to a fictitious ball at Davidson's Inn. After confirming that there were only 2 policemen present, the gang drew their revolvers and bailed up the policemen. They secured the policemen in the lockup near the main building and spent the night in the residential quarters of the police station, where they held one of the officers' wife and young children hostage. The Kelly gang spent most of Sunday preparing for the bank robbery and familiarising themselves with the small town's layout. At 10 a.m. the following day, Kelly and Byrne donned police uniforms, and the 4 outlaws took one of the hostage policemen, Richards, with them into town. They had left the other policeman, Devon, in the police lockup and had warned his wife that if she tried to leave the barracks, they would burn it down, with her and their young children inside. The gang then went into the main street of Geraldry and held up the Royal Mail Hotel and the adjacent bank for over £2,000 in cash as well as other valuables. After holding up the hotel, Ned went with 2 hostages to the newspaper owner's home, where he asked for copies of his famous Geraldry letter to be published, which I will go into more detail on in a little bit, but found that the newspaper owner had earlier escaped capture at the bank and fled the town. After a detour to appraise a local famous racehorse, Ned then returned to the hotel and delivered a speech to the hostages, outlining his grievances against the police and the justice system, before telling the hostages, who now numbered about 30 people, that they were free to go. Shortly after this, the gang fled the town with their earnings, and Kelly and Hart were not seen again by the police for 17 months. As for that famous letter I promised I would go further into, prior to arriving in Geraldry, Kelly wrote a lengthy letter with the aim of explaining his path to outlawry, justifying his actions, and outlining the alleged injustices his family had suffered at the hands of the police, and also attempted to invoke a tradition of Irish rebellion against what he called the tyrannism of the English yoke. This handwritten 56-page and 7,391-word document was described by Kelly as a bit of my life, and has been interpreted in many different ways. Some view it as a proto-republican manifesto, whereas others see it as a murderous and maniacal rant and an insight into Kelly's grandiosity. The letter is noted for its unusual grammar and highlights Kelly's sense of humour. In probably the most famous passage, he calls the Victorian police a parcel of big, ugly, fat-necked, wombat-headed, big-bellied, magpie-legged, narrow-hipped, spalaw-footed sons of Irish bailiffs or English landlords. The infamous letter closes with the ominous, "Neglect this and abide by the consequences, which shall be worse than the rust in the wheat of Victoria or the drought of a dry season to the grasshoppers in New South Wales. I do not wish to give the order full force without giving timely warning, but I am a widow's son, outlawed, and my orders must be obeyed." Well, I think that's where I'm going to end this part. I didn't really think this would end up needing a part 3, but so many important things happened in his life and I want to give you the full picture. For the future, I would appreciate it if you guys let me know if you prefer me splitting the videos into multiple parts like this or just one long video. But with all that being said, the next part should be out relatively soon. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Enough rambling though. As always, I hope you guys had a good Christmas and I hope you're having a great day, night, wherever you are. And I hope to see you in the next one.